Hi, in this episode I'll be talking to my friend Simon Morris. He talks openly about diving with diabetes and how he got bent. Over a brew, Simon elaborates on his experiences with working for BARE and Scubapro, keeping him away from his wife for almost 12 and a half years travelling the world, how he met Jaques Cousteau, and then his inspirations for creating magnificent underwater bronze sculptures. Do you fancy a brew?
So, can you hear
me? Oh, I need my headphones. I forgot my headphones. I'm a lunatic. I can hear now.
All of my favorite people are lunatics.
Mate, nice to see you. Thanks for coming back.
Hey, no problem.
So how's your leg? How are you doing?
Oh, I'm down to a Band-Aid about that big.
I had to laugh when I saw that because I just thought I've done so many little wounds like that. So
well, they were worried, because I'm diabetic, they worry about wounds in the extremities.
Yeah.
And the woman told me the other day I've been for 7 treatments, I think.
Right.
And it was a month ago Saturday that I did it.
Yeah.
A month ago yesterday that I went to the hospital because I wasn't happy with the way that it was healing.
Right.
And when she got my medical history and saw the wound, she thought to herself that I was going to be going every 3 days for 3 months. And I have what will almost certainly be the last dressing change on Friday. Yeah. And it's literally down to a Band-Aid that big.
Well, that's good.
Just at the very deepest part, and the rest is just scar now.
Yeah.
And so that's very encouraging for me, Andy, because the way you heal is a direct representation of how well you're managing your diabetes.
Right. I didn't know that.
If your sugars are high and you're a mess, you don't heal very well. Unfortunately, I still do. So it's good.
Well, I suppose you don't want to go cutting yourself that regular just to check on your own health,
no,
do you?
No. It was funny when years after I got bent and I went for a whole bunch of hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Yeah.
I had cut myself just before. I spent 5 days in the chamber.
Yeah.
6 hours a day on O2 at 30 feet. And just before I went in, I just cut myself. Nothing serious. No. But I've never seen a wound healed so fast. If
really?
So not surprising. They use hyperbaric oxygen to treat gas gangrene.
Right.
And so that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Okay, so Simon, welcome back to Are You a Scuba Diver Fancy a Brew podcast. Unfortunately, we have to record this again because we had sound difficulties the first time. But welcome back nonetheless. If you'd like to give a little intro into yourself, and we'll see where we go.
All righty, thanks, Andy, and thanks for having me back. Too bad about the audio problems the first time. Good afternoon, evening, good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Morris. I'm a bronze sculptor living on Salt Spring Island near Vancouver, British Columbia. And I have spent most of my life working in the scuba diving industry since I was 15 years old, and I'm 62 now, so that's been a little while. And I've also been extremely fortunate to combine a career in bronze sculpture concurrently with my life in the world of scuba, and the two have very much complemented each other and given me an incredibly full and interesting life with travel all over the world. So I've been extremely fortunate, and I'm basically trying to use my sculpture as a vehicle to raise funds for various environmental organizations around the world.
That's great. Almost everyone that I've interviewed for this podcast, in one way or another, is all trying to get involved with the environment more. And I think that's I'd say the vast majority of us divers feel the same way, whether it be plastics or sharks or just litter picks, going around beaches and collecting rubbish and things like that. Everyone seems to have some charitable piece of their life.
Well, I think it's very necessary, and especially for scuba divers, because let's be really honest, if there's nothing in the ocean to go and see, or it's too dirty to get into, our love, our passion, our life, and our industry will simply die.
Yeah. Have you seen the Chinese are sort of camped out on the fringes of the Galapagos at the minute, aren't they?
It's just unbelievable. Yeah.
So we need. I kind of contemplated selling my house and going to Galapagos just so I could see it before it's gone.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, the Galapagos has been under a lot of strain for years, and there was actually a marketing campaign. God, it must be 10 years ago now.
Right.
That basically said, if you love the Galapagos, don't come.
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, it has such. I mean, it's such a confined little area,
Yeah.
and yet it has such incredible biodiversity, and it simply can't stand thousands of people tromping all over it and cruise ships anchoring and everything like that. It's too small an area. It's too concentrated.
Well, there's a British guy, you may have heard of him, Monty Halls, his name is, about 50, yep. And he's just done a load of charity stuff. Like he did a full Ironman a couple of days ago. Looks horrendous, did that for charity. But he's like the president of the Galapagos Conservation Trust, based out of London. And he's done two series now, or seasons, as you perhaps call them, over in North America.
Yep.
About the Galapagos. And to sort of counteract his carbon footprint, he tried to make it more carbon neutral, or certainly in that. So he's planted like a million trees, to sort of offset that carbon footprint of him flying there. But obviously him highlighting the issues that he's there are quite good.
Well, and that's a very laudable approach, but you can't plant a million trees on the Galapagos.
No.
What does it do? I mean, and again, this is my thing with the Galapagos. It is such a small, concentrated area that planting a million trees somewhere else is a wonderful thing, but it doesn't help what's happening to the Galapagos.
No, it doesn't. I suppose you're right.
Not that I've done any better. I mean, what brew have you got? This is really boring. It's 7-Up and orange juice.
7-Up and orange juice.
Yeah, it's 33 degrees outside today, so it's
flipping heck.
It's hot today.
But it's not that boring because it's in a Rolls Royce mug. So you're clearly doing all right for yourself, mate.
I don't have the car. I just have the cooler.
Well, you should get the key ring as well, so it kind of looks like you have. Get the key ring.
True, yeah.
Ace. Yeah. So where did it all start for you? I mean, I know that you left the UK when you were about 6 years old, didn't you?
I was 8, yeah. It's 1966, we moved to Vancouver.
Yeah. So where did your love for the ocean and getting wet sort of take off from there? Is it as you moved over?
No, it was actually prior to that. My parents taught me to swim when I was about 6 months old. And
they chucked you in? Your dad chucked you in, didn't he?
Just chucked me in the swimming pool, and we did the same with both of our kids. Only we had mask snorkel and stuff, and I could actually watch them underwater. And it's really an incredible process because we did the same thing that I don't remember being thrown in the pool.
Yeah.
But basically, my mom was holding me in the shallow end, and my dad was about 8 or 10 feet away. And my mom held me facing my dad, and then just gently pushed me towards my dad. And he told me that I just kind of dog paddled and thrashed around 2 or 3 feet under the water with no problem whatsoever, which doesn't make me an aquatic superhero. All babies will do that, and they have their eyes open and their mouths wide open, but they don't swallow any water. And when we did it with both of our kids, and our kids are 38 and 40 now.
Same age as me then, yeah.
Yeah, so when they were 6 months old, we did the same thing, but I had the advantage of a mask and snorkel, so I could actually watch her underwater, and she was having a great time. Her eyes were looking at me, her mouth was wide open, huge smile on her face, and just dog paddling away like mad. And so I actually can never remember not being totally in love with being in the water. It's just, I mean, you don't remember stuff when you're 6 months old. I don't remember those episodes in the pool with my parents, but I do remember as soon as I have any memories whatsoever, we were in the water a lot. and I absolutely loved it. And when I was about 5 or 6, I tormented my parents until they found me a little mast, snorkel, and fin set,
Mm.
which in the early 60s in London weren't that easy to find. And of course, they were called goggles and flippers
Yeah.
In those days. And we used to summer at Brighton Beach and Hailing Island and stuff
Right.
like that. And I would just get in the water with my gear and basically stay in there until my teeth were chattering and I turned blue. And, my dad would eventually haul me out. So I honestly can't remember ever not being in love with the ocean.
Well, you said with no memories of certainly being that young. I don't suppose I have. I think the earliest I can recollect was my 7th birthday. But
Yeah.
you being 8 and then having to up sticks, which doesn't sound so bad to be fair, to move over to North America and Canada, surely you must have had an awareness of leaving behind sort of your school friends
Oh,
and that. How was
oh,
that? Do you remember?
oh, absolutely. I still remember, oh, 5 or 6 of my good friends, Austin and Gregory Venezian, and people that I went to school with. In England, you start school the semester you're going to turn 5.
Yeah.
So I started school in January. I was still 4. And then when we came to Canada, I was 8. And in Canada, you start school at 6. And so most people, when they're 8, are in grade 2, possibly grade 3. But when I came to Canada, they do a test. And I don't know what it's like these days. And I'm not bragging about England or myself. But in those days, the early childhood education in England was streets ahead of Canada. And I knew way more than the
Really?
kids in grade 2
So
and
did you
grade
sort of
3.
fly up the classes then?
They tested me and they said that I could easily have managed being dropped into grade 5 as far as the work
Wow.
was concerned, but it would be a social nightmare because in grade 5 kids are 11 and I was 8. And so they put me in grade 4,
Yeah.
and I was still throughout my entire life at school far and away the youngest person in each grade.
Oh,
Which for the most part was okay, except for those puberty years when everybody
yeah.
was a foot taller than me. And so I got carried off the rugby field just about every single game. I was just too little. And I'm not a big person to begin with. I'm only
No.
5'8" now. So that was a problem. But no, I totally remember my time in England and loved it there. I went to a school called Emmanuel we lived at Hampstead Heath. And I remember the school very well. It was a school and a church. I was a choir boy. I used to have a good voice. And so I do remember leaving a lot behind. But we came to Canada a year after my mom and dad's best friends. And Alec was my godfather. And he had a daughter and a son, and his son was my best friend. So it was a bit of a wrench when they left.
Yeah.
And as soon as we came over, I was back with my best friend.
That's amazing, that, isn't it?
And if you love being a kid and being outdoors and being in the water and everything like that, British Columbia beats the hell out of growing up in London.
I should bet.
I didn't miss it for very long and
No.
just fell in love with the place over here in a heartbeat.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that from our previous conversation. I didn't know you'd sort of met up with your best mate again. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Alec was my dad's best friend and he was my godfather. That's great. We lived close together and we were like this. We were always together. So, and his son Ralph was my best friend over there. And so it was kind of like old home week when we got over here.
So from there, then you've graduated high school and whatnot. I think you've been married quite some time now, haven't you? Didn't you tell me?
It'll be 40 years in September. Yeah.
Congratulations. So you've got a month and a bit to push. Have you got any plans?
Well, we had planned to have a huge, we were going to rent a hall and have 150 friends in, and but it's in September and we've just canceled everything. We'll maybe have a a huge 41st wedding anniversary party next year.
I think that's what I'll do for my birthday next March. I'll have a happy 41st birthday instead of,
Yeah,
we did
that's right.
nothing because it was like 2 weeks after lockdown for us. So we didn't do anything.
I was thinking that the other day that that song by Prince, "We're Gonna Party Like It's 1999,"
Yeah.
and I'm gonna rewrite the words, "We're gonna party like it's 2021," because it still works.
Yeah. So how have you been affected by COVID and the lockdown procedures and stuff that's been in place? Have you been affected at all other than cancelling
All
plans?
almost zero, to be honest with you. The When I made the change, when I left the corporate world and decided to sculpt full time, was March the 3rd.
Yeah.
I think that was when I came home from the mainland, and because I used to work on the mainland 3 days a week, so I would go over Tuesday morning, come home Thursday night,
Right.
which I really didn't like, but it was just part of the job.
Yeah.
And when I left, I got home the evening of March the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, fortunately, I've been so busy making new work that I've virtually been locked in my studio 8 to 10 hours a day ever since I started. So, yeah, I miss my friends.
Because of lockdown and certain other things, that's how you found me, wasn't it? You'd seen my logo, do you remember?
I think that's
And
correct.
that's how you
And
came
I
in
liked
touch.
it because of my passion to ultimately do a sculpture of a disabled diver.
Yeah. I mean, just put it out there. I'm not disabled. I've not been, no one's actually
Oh, I see the
diagnosed me.
scar on your leg. You probably qualify.
But having a bad knee, my logo shows that I've got a false leg, which, anyway. So
Yeah.
you saw that and got in touch with me, which is how we ended up chatting, which I'm very grateful for, because now if I was to put on my map behind me there, I could put pins in that now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
People in loads of countries just through starting this podcast. So I think that's a great thing. But even better so, I get to talk to you about things that really interest me. So the first one being that you'd spent quite a few years traveling the world, haven't you?
Well,
But worse still, traveling without your wife.
12 years.
But managed to stay married for 40. How have you done that? Tell me
Being
how to be a
well.
parent. So you must be quite content, you two, and happy, and she must be quite comfortable with you traveling away and that.
Yeah, it's really great because I have been away 12 years out of a 40-year marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been very fortunate. I've been darn near all over the world. I haven't been to Africa or South America or Antarctica, but I've been damn near everywhere else.
Yeah.
I've been all over Europe, all over Asia, Australia, Hawaii, all across the United States and Canada. I've dived in communist China. So the work that I've done, I've been all through the Canadian Arctic and the U.S. Arctic and the Bering Sea. Through my work, which has really taken me off the beaten track, and I've seen a lot of places that most people don't get to see, done a lot of things that most people don't get to do. And quite honestly, Andy, I've had more fun in my life than any 5 people deserve.
It's a common trend, this, that people that I generally speak to on here, I look at them and go, wow, you have had a flipping good life. I hope you realise how lucky you've had it. And a lot of them do, I think, they're quite humble, that they've been in the right place at the right time, or they've had the right idea or the right drive and support to do that. So just to ruin my life a little bit more, where was your first ever dive?
My first ever dive was at a place called White Cliff Park in Howe Sound, which is a fjord. Actually, I think it's the world's southernmost fjord, because it is an actual fjord. Like, the British Columbia coast is very similar to Norway. And if you look at our geography, we have fjords. And I believe that Howe Sound is the world's southernmost fjord, well, south of the equator anyway, or north of the equator. And it's probably 25 miles long, 7 or 8 miles across. It's In some areas where I dived, if you get in the water and swim out 100 feet, you're in 600 feet of water. There's walls that
Yeah.
are fantastic. And so my first checkout dive when I got certified in June of 1973 was in Howe Sound.
I bet it was crystal clear as well, wasn't it?
Not in the summertime.
No?
Near Vancouver, we have a massive river that comes down through British Columbia, and it's called the Fraser.
Okay.
And in the spring, we have a massive freshet, and there's an enormous amount of fresh water comes into. If you look on the map, if you see Vancouver Island off the west coast, we do most of our diving on the inside in an area called Georgia Strait.
Yeah.
And it gets filled up with muddy brown fresh water.
All right.
And it brings an enormous amount of nutrients with it. And as the water warms up in late spring, we get a big plankton bloom.
Right.
So in the spring and summer near Vancouver, the visibility is not that great, but in the winter in the same spot can be 30 meters.
Wow.
So my first dives were not great viz because they were in June.
I was going to say, if you were to turn around and see your painting on the wall, the sort of green edge of that,
yeah,
that's exactly what the visibility is like all year round around where we are. It's terrible. Yeah. So what took you up to Salt Spring then?
We got tired of city life. We lived in a community about 50 kilometers east of Vancouver, and our kids were going to school there, and it was getting. And I worked for BARE, the dry suit company, at the time because they were out there, and it was just getting too busy, and we wanted the kids to have really an idyllic childhood.
Yeah.
And this was we moved over here in 1990, shortly after I put the Mermaid underwater, because that really triggered my career as a sculptor. So in 1990, we moved to Salt Spring because it's an artistic community. Plus, it's an absolutely beautiful jewel of an island in the middle of the Emerald Sea with great diving all around it. And it's been paradise for almost 30 years. Our kids loved going to school here. We have a lake that's full of bass and trout. That's literally a 10-minute walk for my son when he was a kid with his fishing pole. Yeah. And we kept a canoe down by the lake. So after school, he would just grab his fishing rod and run down to the lake and go fishing.
I'm so jealous. It's envious. I don't like the term jealous.
Yeah, me too. Because when I was his age, when we moved over here, he was still pretty young, and I was still living in either London or Vancouver. Yeah. So so it's an artist community. So you could actually tell people that you're a sculptor without them thinking you're some sort of deviant. And so we've been here ever since and love it.
Are you still managing to get in the water much? Have you done any diving this year?
I have dived this year, but not a lot because there's no dive shop on Salt Spring. And for the first little while, I was just absolutely not leaving. So I'm sitting here with 5 empty scuba tanks. And even, my number one dive buddy is my son. Yeah. And we haven't even been close to them. He has a boat. He lives in a little town called Sydney. He lives right on the water in a marina, and he has a boat there. His wife is 50% owner in an accounting firm, and he has a construction company, and they have no children. They have the most disgusting life that you could possibly imagine.
I bet.
So that he's who I do 99% of my diving with, and we haven't even been getting over there. So you asked me earlier, has COVID affected me much? Yeah, I haven't been doing much diving this year, but I am, other than because of this, yes, I'm still an active diver after 47 years. I don't dive anywhere nearly as aggressively as I used to, because I told you in our last interview that
Yeah.
I got quite badly bent in 2000.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure, I will. But yeah, so in a nutshell, that has really curbed my the extent of my diving. I never do more than one dive a day anymore, and I never go over 80 feet. And if I can't get 40% nitrox, I don't put a toe in the water. So, but if I can meet those parameters, then I still absolutely love it. But in 2000, I was diving on my first mermaid up in Powell River, which is about 5 hours north of Vancouver. And I had an accident with a novice diver who surfaced too quickly. And there was three of us diving. There was the novice who panicked, one of my best friends, and myself. And because I'm diabetic, I brought this on myself. It's totally my fault. It's too bad the novice panicked and sort of triggered the situation. But because I'm diabetic, diabetics pee a lot. And it's okay in a wetsuit, but it's not so cool in a dry suit. And so I was getting to the point where by the end of the dive, I was just crippled needing a pee. and so I made this stupid mistake, and I know better. I stopped drinking a lot of water before the dive so that I wouldn't have to pee. So diabetics are generally more dehydrated. Like, you have to work very hard to stay hydrated when you're a diabetic, and purposely dehydrating yourself before going scuba diving is pretty much the stupidest thing a person can do. And in retrospect, I don't know how I got away with it for so long, but I did a dive to 55 feet on the mermaid for 6 minutes with a 40-second descent. And I took a type 2 central nervous hit to the 5th cranial nerve, which gave me a decade of the worst pain that you can even imagine. It kept me out of the water for 5 years. I went for the hyperbaric treatment, and the hyperbaric doctor said, you're done, you're never diving again, because your chance of being rebent is just ridiculously high. So I stayed out of the water until 2005. And I have a very good friend. I was working for Scubapro at the time. I was general manager for Canada for Scubapro. And so I had, and still do have, many friends in the diving industry and dive shops and everything like that. And a good friend and a very good customer by the name of Vern Johnson, who had a store called Diving Dynamics in Kelowna in British Columbia, also had a commercial diving service company and a commercial diving training school and a instructor training school and a hyperbaric chamber where he offered hyperbaric oxygen therapy and treatment with the local hospital, as well as training and everything like that. And I was up in his store one day in late 2004, and I was just lamenting the fact that I was so depressed because I couldn't dive anymore. Because the trouble about not being able to dive anymore, but still working in the industry, is all of your friends and all of the people around you always have their brand new, no shit, there I was stories. And I was out of the water. I was thoroughly depressed about it. And he said, you know what? He said, I'll bet you if we get some oxygen therapy in you, we can get you fixed. He said, I think the risk is incredibly low. And he said, but if you want to come up in the spring, he said, I'll only charge you for the oxygen. So that next spring I went up, and for 6 days I spent 6 or 7 hours in the chamber at 33 feet on pure O2 with a mask. And you know how it is with O2, you go 20 minutes and then 5 minutes off and everything. So I've never been so pink in my entire life. And I went through through all of that with no adverse effects. At first, I got a lot of tingling and stuff like that, but nothing serious. And So after that, he said, okay, now you're ready to go scuba diving. And he said, I'm going to give you some profiles. And he said, do not vary from those profiles
Yeah.
until I tell you. My first profile was 30 minutes at 30 feet. No, sorry, 10 minutes at 30 feet.
Yeah.
20 minutes at 20 feet and 30 minutes at 10 feet.
Right.
On 40% nitrox. So basically what that turns out to is further oxygen therapy, right?
Absolutely.
And so all my dives for the first, I'll bet it was 2 years. That was my dive profile for 2 years.
So do you dive 40% on your back? As in you breathe that throughout the dive?
Yeah.
Or do you always have it as a decompression gas?
Nope. If for a rig, I never go anywhere. I don't even carry a dive computer with me, Andy.
Really?
I have a profile,
And you stick to that.
And I stick to that. Now I've made the profile deeper, and it took me 6 years, but I got to 80 feet.
Okay.
And and now if I go to 80 feet, it's still 40% nitrox.
Yeah.
And I will spend no more than 10 feet at 80 feet.
10 minutes.
And then back, and then back up, and most of the entire hour or so of the dive is above 30.
Wow.
And I will not dive with just one buddy. I dive alone, or I dive as a third party tag along. But I will not take responsibility to look after another diver. So if I'm, theoretically, if I was with another diver that got hurt or panicked or ran out of air, it's my responsibility to surface with them, and I will not. Right?
I get you.
Because if I have to do something crazy, sure, shoot, and I'll get vented.
So let's just jump back to that then. So what did they diagnose what actually caused the bend? Was it you being dehydrated and being a diabetic, or was it that rapid ascent?
Well, it was a combination of being dehydrated and then making an ascent that my body couldn't deal with.
Yeah.
And
what was the adverse effects with that pain then?
Oh, Jesus. I had a cramp in my shoulder. Actually, it was kind of funny because the three of us were diving.
Yeah.
And the novice that panicked 6 minutes into the dive and started rushing for the surface. So I swam up and grabbed her by the BC, drained her BC, said, look at me, we're going back down, because there's an anchor line on the bottom that goes to an up line. Okay. So I pointed to that. The visibility was good, so I was able to tell her what we were going to do. I took her back down to the bottom, and but she was fighting me and everything like that. So net, we hit the surface in 40 seconds. Wow. And so theoretically, from 60 feet, if you were to spend 6 minutes at 60 feet and do a 40-second descent, if you held your breath, you'd get embolized, but you should be okay. Our third friend, he popped up about 30 seconds after we did. They were both fine, right? And so we took the novice back to the beach because we were shooting video of the mermaid. And we went back down and finished the photo shoot. And this was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And then, so we had surface interval and a lunch, but we did 2 more very shallow dives that afternoon, none over 40 feet. And then we had a long drive home. And I can remember getting into bed at about 11:30 at night. And as I crawled into bed, I felt a little bit of pins and needles in my cheek.
Right.
And I thought, oh, that's weird. What an odd place to get pins and needles. And it wasn't bad or anything. And I just fell asleep. And I woke up in the morning and I looked like that. My arm was paralyzed. My face was all squinched up. And obviously I wasn't in a lot of pain at the time because pain wakes you up.
Yeah.
Right. So I thought, well, this isn't very good. So I had to drive my son to school. So I drove him to school, and then I went to the ER, and I said, you know, I'm going, I think something's the matter with me.
They describe that look. They would describe it from where I'm from. You had a face like a dropped pie.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always used to joke I looked like Joe Cocker singing, you know.
Yeah,
And so anyway, as I was in the hospital, the pain started to arrive, and I said, I've either had a stroke or, you know, something's going on. So they did some testing, and they said, nope, no, you haven't had a stroke or anything
yeah,
like that. And so they said, what were you doing over the weekend? I said, nothing out of the ordinary. I went diving.
yeah.
And then I went, oh crap. Right.
I've got a bend.
Because I've my whole life I'd been firmly under the belief that only idiots and assholes get bent.
Hmm.
And can I say that?
Yeah, can you say what you want?
And so it was beyond my imagination that I could be bent.
Really?
And I said, well, I've got a friend who's a diving physician. Maybe we should phone him.
Yeah.
And his name was Dr. Mike Leposki. And so they looked him up and found him. And I got on the phone with him, and he said, I said, Mike, I said, I don't want to be any trouble. He said, it just doesn't matter, right? If you're bent, you're bent. And if you're not bent, it's good to know you're not bent. Get over it.
Yeah.
Right? So he was in Vancouver. And so they actually contacted the ferries and held a ferry for me,
No way.
so that I could get over there. And when you get to the Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal north of Vancouver, there's two ways to get down. There's an ocean road, which is twisty, turny, and not very fast. Or there's the freeway, which is about 1,000 feet up, climbs up into the hills and goes along. And so my wife was driving, because I was incapable by this point, and we started heading up the hill. And I said, nope, this ain't working. We're gonna have. So
Turn
I said,
around.
back down. So we took the longer road, and so then within an hour of getting off the ferry, I was in the chamber, and the relief of getting in the chamber and getting to depth. I did a modified, what is it, T6, and so it was 6 or 7 hours at 66 feet, partially on oxygen, partially on air, et cetera. And the relief from the initial symptoms were.
Is it fast? Like,
it's pretty quick. It's pretty quick. You know, you get a little sort of shadow or remnant, but it's like, you know, when you hurt yourself badly and the pain's intense for a little while and then it fades. It's sort of like that. And but after 6 hours, I was feeling pretty good, and they got me out. And he said, and he passed away not that long ago, and I love the guy like a brother, but I have to disagree with his treatment, because he said there was no point in me having any further treatment. I was done. And then the pain started arriving, and so I got hit in the 5th cranial nerve, and I had a severe pain that ran down my shoulder to about here, and then under my arm and into my little finger here. My finger to this day is pins and needly numb, this finger. And then it went up to my ear, down my neck to my jaw to right there, and then around my jaw to right there, and then up to there, around my eye, and up to there, and stopped there. And that was like a line of fire in my body for 10 years. It was gross. And in my left shoulder, I had a cramp, and you know what a cramp feels like.
Yeah.
I had a cramp in my left shoulder for a decade.
So literally the whole left side of your upper shoulder, come face and neck was just in pain forever.
Engulfed in pain for 10 years.
Wow.
And painkillers didn't do anything for it. And then I had, 5 years later, I told you already the story, I had the oxygen therapy. That helped a little bit, took the top edge of it. And most of the pain gradually sort of did fade away, except for this cramp in my shoulder. And my doctor eventually found me a clinic in Vancouver called Change Pain. And they specialize, it's a mixture of Western medicine and acupuncture,
Yeah.
and specialize in long-term chronic pain treatment. And what they do is they inject sterile saline solution into the fascia, which is the layer right above the muscle tissue. And the way they explained it to me, because no drugs, I mean, they were putting me on narcotics and opioids, which were killing me, but not relieving the pain. So when I went there, they described the situation to me as if you make a fist and you make the tightest fist that you can, and you hold it for 10 years, you will not be able to open that fist because the muscles have just, that's the new normal.
Yeah.
That's what creates the pain and the tension. So because water is incompressible, if you inject water into that muscle, it has no option but to start opening up.
All right.
So over 12 weeks, I had 2,400 injections of sterile saline into my neck and my face and shoulder and all of that kind of stuff. It's painless, it's aggravating, but it doesn't hurt. But it's an exhausting process. But as the beauty of it, Andy, is it's instant. So they said to me, where do you want me to start? And I said, I'll start with this golf ball thing here. So they started all around here. So the first time I had 200 injections in this area. And it's just like tap, 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 tap.
Yeah.
Like it's like a big needle, and you know. And when the pain went away, it went away like pow, it was gone. So for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't in agony. And I just sat in the office and cried my face off because the relief was just,
I bet.
I couldn't believe that I could walk in and 10 minutes later not be in pain there anymore. So over the next 11 week, I averaged 200 shots every Monday. And they dealt with 90%. Like I still have a little, it's not even really discomfort, it's awareness.
Yeah.
And I have a little numb, I've got a little numb spot in my cheek here where you could probably stick a needle in there and I wouldn't feel it.
Do you find, because I've got the same after an operation on my leg, and it gets itchy, but it's so numb that I can't get that itch. Or, you know, there's something I just need to tickle, but because of the numbness, oh, it's so annoying.
I have an incessant itch right here.
Right.
That
you can't scratch.
I could take a hand grinder to it.
Mate, that's really interesting story. I'm glad we got the chance to talk again, because I kind of regretted last time not dipping into this a bit more, because I've luckily, touch wood, not been bent yet. And I think a lot of divers are quite easily become complacent in the way we dive. You know, we're taught our ascent rates, our descent rates, and sometimes we push them a little bit. And like you said, you didn't really push it that much. You'd only been down 6 minutes and you hadn't on-gassed enough, really.
Yeah.
So it's a crazy one, isn't it?
My particular hyperbaric physician, Mike Leposki, he says there's no such thing as an undeserved hit. And he said, but your case comes about as close as you can. He said, if you hadn't been diabetic and dehydrated yourself,
probably been fine. There's
almost no reason. But when you're diabetic, your whole diffusion and everything is compromised.
Right.
And so it is the very last thing that I should have been doing, is dehydrate myself. I should have just pissed my dry suit and washed it each time.
So do you still dive a dry suit now, or do you do warm water? So have you got a P valve?
No, my dives is a lot better managed.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, and I can keep properly hydrated, and I don't need a P valve. So
I'm murder. I mean, obviously, I love a cup of tea. Hence the reason I named my podcast after getting together and having a brew. So it doesn't take much. And certainly look at the size of my mug. It's almost as big as my head. So 2 or 3 of them in a morning before we get in for a dive, my bladder's like a rugby ball.
And caffeine is such an effective diuretic.
Yeah.
Makes you pee.
So when it came to buying,
that is what I don't do anymore. I don't drink coffee on the morning of a dive.
Okay, yeah.
I only drink water, and I make sure. And I also, in the pocket of my buoyancy compensator, I have a little waterproof pouch that I put orange juice in.
Oh, you can have a slurp underwater.
So that I can, because it doesn't matter how well you manage your diabetes, sometimes you can have a bit of a low blood sugar episode, and they're serious, right? You need to deal with them.
I saved someone's life, from that a few years ago. Little boy used to live down the road, and he was friends with my girls. So they were, must have been 10, 15 years ago. And he come knocking on the door this one morning. He said, "I need you to come. My mum's not very well." I didn't know she was diabetic. I knew nothing other than that. So I ran down going, why would she want me if she's not well? Anyway, she just literally sat bolt upright on the couch, but almost mesmerized, looking right through me, looked a little sort of sweaty almost,
I'm probably shaking like a leaf.
Well, I said, well, what's up with her? And I eventually got out of him that she was diabetic. And we managed to get like a bit of chocolate bar and then one of those juice boxes with like a really concentrated, like it's called Ribena. I don't know if you come across that over there.
Oh, I love Ribena, blackcurrant.
Yeah. So literally squirted that box down her throat. Obviously, there's quite a lot of sugar in that. And then a bit of this chocolate, tried to get that in her mouth. And almost like you said, the pain relief or the muscle. She just came awake and she was like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I've just saved your life."
When a low blood sugar episode is truly horrible. It has all of the mental and physical characteristics of being absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
You're sweating. I tremble literally like that.
Really?
You're terrified. You think you're going to die. You've got no energy. You can barely walk. Your vision starts to shut down. It's absolutely horrible. And fortunately, you get to know that it's coming on, and you can just take little steps that prevent it, like eat a sandwich or something like that. If it captures you in a place, I keep a bag with me everywhere I go with dextrose pills in it and stuff like that, in case I'm trapped in the car or whatever. But if it gets a hold of you, it's really, and you can die. You can actually die from it if it gets bad enough. And but when you take that sugar, like you have the really sweet drink.
Yeah.
I've never done heroin, but I guess it's like how heroin goes through you, because it goes through you like a freight train.
Really?
One of the things that it makes me interested is how fast your system can convert raw sugar to glucose, and how fast it gets, because you can feel it hitting your bloodstream. And my hands will be like this, right? And I drink the juice or whatever, and within a minute they're like that.
No way. That's crazy.
And you can look at them, and I've trained myself to hold my hands still because I'm a sculptor, so I can hold my hands pretty steady. But when your sugar's low, it's the worst train wreck feeling in the world.
Interesting story, mate. Thanks for sharing that. So let's get on to a bit more diving stuff then. So I've been doing a bit of research like I do with everyone I talk to, so as I can try and pull some cool stories out to share with people that perhaps you wouldn't get from, just looking through whatever. So I see you've got a picture with Jaques Cousteau.
Yeah.
So did you know him well, or was it just a one-off meeting, or what's the script?
I've met Cousteau twice. I met him in Vancouver at Expo 86, where he actually bought the Alcyon. Do you remember the Alcyon? It was his second ship.
No.
His first ship, the super iconic one, was the Calypso.
Yeah, I remember that.
In the early 80s, he built a second ship called the Alcyon, which was a wind turbine. So it was a sailing ship, but it had these two massive pillars that looked a little bit like airplane wings
Yeah.
sticking straight up. And it was very state of the art at the time. And he brought that to Expo, and there was an opportunity for a bunch of us in the scuba diving industry to meet him, and I met him. I met him then, and then the picture that I guess you found. Am I wearing a tuxedo?
I think you were, yeah.
Yeah. That was at DEMA in New Orleans, and I had. They were doing a fundraiser, and I had donated a sculpture of two bottlenose dolphins. It was called Deep Reef, and I donated those to the Cousteau Society, and also at the same time joined and donated to a program called Ocean Futures. And there was a big sort of gala event that he was at, and so I got to meet him again. So can't say we were friends. I met his son, Jean-Michel, many more times than I met Jaques Cousteau. But those were the two times that I met him. He's a very interesting guy, but I would hazard a guess that he does not remember meeting me the way I remember meeting him.
Well, see, obviously I've known of the name of him for quite a lot of my life, but I'm probably too young to remember the show that he was on the telly, you know, whenever it was, early 80s.
The Silent World.
So I've only seen snippets of him diving like a triple set and different things, you know. I think when he had that triple set on, from memory, he had just like a pair of swimming trunks on and some fins, and that was it. And one of those round masks.
Yep. I had one of those.
Did you? Well, there's a few. I don't know what manufacturer it is, but somebody's brought one of them back out now to sort of a bit of a revivalist.
I know that there was a company named Voigt that made a lot of the great big oval ones. But you have to remember that Cousteau founded U.S. Divers, and so most of the gear he wore would have been U.S. Divers gear.
I think what everyone that listens to this will have definitely heard of Scubapro that you've mentioned a few times.
Yeah.
And since we first spoke a month or two ago, I've seen more and more of BARE. I hadn't heard of it initially, but I'm seeing it more and more. Perhaps because my horizons have opened, I'm looking at different things. I don't want to plague you for too long to tell me about this because I've asked you about it before, but it's a big topic for me, this. Scubapro jet fins, best fins I could ever buy, I think, for myself. And I know there's a bit of a tale about it. If you wouldn't mind elaborating on it a little bit and tell us why, a little bit of gossip about them.
It's kind of funny because when I learned to dive in 1973, I was a U.S. Divers fan. Yeah. And I still think they make great gear. But my first regulator was the U.S. Divers Calypso 4, and I had my heart set on the Royal Aquamaster, which was their top line double hose regulator. Yeah. And it was just in 1973 and 72, 73 that the single hose regulators were coming into popularity, and I didn't like them at all. They didn't look sexy. That whole double hose thing and James Bond and everything like that was that was the cat's ass for me. And my instructor convinced me that the single hose regulator was the way to go, and so I got this model called the Calypso 4, and they weren't very easy breathing in those days. Like if you could breathe through one of those regulators, you were actually qualified to suck a golf ball through 40 feet of garden hose. Especially at depth and everything like that. But you know, they were pretty reliable, and I didn't have a buoyancy compensator. They basically hadn't been invented yet, but my fins were U.S. Divers rocket fins.
Right.
And this is the segue into the story, because when I joined Scubapro in 1990, I learned the story of how the Scubapro jet fin came to be. And the jet fin was invented in the early 60s by Georges Bochat. And everybody knows the diving company Bochat.
Absolutely.
And so he made this fin, and it worked incredibly well and was tough as nails. And he figured the way to make money was to bring it into the North American market and sell it to U.S. divers. So he bought some rubber fins over, and met with the president of Aqualung. They were polite, but they blew him off. They didn't see it. The rocket fin did not exist yet, so this was a pretty radical new design for the early '60s. And so he was, obviously a little bit upset by that. But there was this new company called Scubapro on the market, and so he went to see them, and they loved the idea, and they purchased it, and it was patented, and they purchased the patent from him and the global distribution rights. And as far as that side of it, the rest is history. It's probably the single most iconic and successful diving product ever, because look at the jet fin today and one from the '60s, and they are virtually unchanged. And can you think of any other piece of kit that you've ever seen that is unchanged since the '60s? Not just in diving, but anywhere. So it's just one of those products. It works for all kinds of kicks. It's bulletproof. It's strong. You can kick it gently if you want to, because of the way that it's made with different durometers of rubber in different parts of the fin. It's just one of those products that just was nailed at the beginning. And so when U.S. divers saw how successful the jet fin was, they thought, oh, we missed the boat here. We better do whatever we can to knock it off and make one that looks good. So they studied the patent, and they figured out if they put the slots, the flow-through slots in a different orientation, they could get around the patent. Wow. And so they came out with the rocket fin, and it was just never as good a fin as the jet. And even though they did their homework, they still managed to infringe on the patent. And so for the life of a patent is 17 years. And so for the first 17 years, U.S. divers had to pay Scubapro $1 a pair for every pair of rocket fins that they
Unlucky. Hey, well, that's a nice segue into your career as a sculptor, because we've touched on, obviously, your travel and all the rest of it. And with being a sculptor, I know one of your most recent sculptures was of a cave diver, wasn't it?
Well, not most recent, but he's been certainly a successful one. In fact, the one that I had the first time that we spoke, I've since sold, and I'm just getting another one cast at the foundry.
Nice one.
Now.
But you had to qualify, or you wanted to qualify as a certified cave diver, didn't you, in order to have some legitimacy?
Yeah, and I did. It was the last thing I did before I got bent. So I was doing all of this cave diving in Florida, getting my training. 7 months later, I got bent.
Wow.
So
have you not been back in a cave?
I would absolutely love to. It wouldn't be smart. If I were to take up diving again, I would not hit 41 years of marriage. My wife divorced me on the spot, I think.
Yeah.
And but no, I absolutely loved it. We did all through the cave systems in Florida. Went through the cave certification process.
Yeah.
Because some cave divers came to me and said, "We'd love you to do a properly set up cave diver sculpture, but you'd have to come down to Florida and learn to cave dive with us."
Yeah.
So that you have some credibility. So the Florida rep for Scubapro is a guy named David Ray, and he's a cave diving instructor. And he knew this other group of people. And they were also the technical advisors to make sure that I got the thing right. So basically, he is properly dressed, state of the art in Scubapro gear, circa late '90s.
Brill. I love that he's got Scuba Project fins on though.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and the frameless mask and the old X-Tech
yeah,
BC and the side mounts and the proper rig configurations. And
brill.
all.
You sort of most recent project that you're working on, sort of selling the dream to different countries and different areas of the ocean, is the Guardian of the Reef. So
Yes.
I believe
Yeah.
you've got a bit of a project. We're trying to get one over in the UK as well, haven't you?
Yeah, and I've actually made progress since the last time we talked on
Great.
that. I've started working very closely with the Seahorse Trust,
Right.
and I just bumped into them on Facebook. So we're looking at doing some projects together,
Right.
because I said to him, I said, with the Guardian of the Reef being half man, half seahorse, we're looking at two areas, Plymouth and Weymouth. We both discovered just outside of Plymouth, in Plymouth Sound, is a place called Drake Island.
Yeah.
And Drake Island has been under the ownership of the British Navy for hundreds of years. Apparently, it's the point from which Drake took off on his circumnavigation adventures. And it was used as a gunnery emplacement by the British Navy literally for hundreds of years. And under the island is only 6 acres. And underneath it, I think there's over a kilometer of tunnels where they kept all of the ammunition and everything. And it basically guarded Plymouth Sound. And it was purchased in August of 2019 by a company that wants to turn it into a very high-end resort and a marine recreation area.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if it's Enterprises or Technology, but out of sheer luck, the company is called Guardian.
No way.
And yeah, so we're in the process of contacting the owner and saying that, you know, this would be such an amazing fit. He's a very, very busy guy, and we haven't reached him yet, but I'm optimistic that it might just be a really good fit. But either way, we're the Seahorse Trust and myself are working very closely together, because as far as I'm concerned, they are a perfect recipient. The type of work that they do, and for me, they are a perfect recipient of funds and to work with. And my plan with the Guardian of the Reef has always been to customize it specifically to the location where it's going to go. So in Cayman, the first one went to a dive resort and diving center called Dive Tech in West Bay in Grand Cayman. And my original plan for the Guardian was on his scepter, there would be a 3-point trident. And the people at Dive Tech said, you know what, we just can't even contemplate the thought of putting something into the ocean with a weapon in its hand. So we compromised, and if you look at the photographs on my website, it's a ball with a fat equator around it, just so that it's more visible underwater. And it's supposed to represent the globe and the world's oceans. So in talking with the Seahorse Trust, they have a beautiful logo. It's worth checking their website out. It's a beautiful graphic design of a seahorse. And I have had their permission that if I put one at either location in England, both the shield will have bas-relief representations of their seahorse logo on it as the embellishments on the shield, and his staff will also have. I'll do their seahorse logo in 3D about this big, and so his staff will be their seahorse logo, because it's really a very attractive thing. And they've also they are going to include my work on their website, so that if they sell it, they will get a percentage, so I can use my work to raise funds for them. And they've also just given me permission to take their their logo and turn it from a 2D graphic into a shallow 3D sculpture. I'll probably do it a foot high or something because my eyes aren't very good for tiny work anymore. But then I will laser scan it and shrink it to jewelry. So
that'd be
we're going
great.
to release a jewelry line, and they will receive a good commission on everything that I sell and have the ability to sell it. So we hope to do a lot of work together to raise funds for the Seahorse in England.
Absolutely, happy days. So how's your Nowhere to Go statue getting on?
In January, I was inducted as a signature member into the Artists for Conservation Foundation. It's very hard to get into. I was very bit humbled and honored to be invited to join, because in their words, they represent the 500 most influential wildlife artists that focus on environmental conservation around the world. And so I was pretty amazed to be invited and accepted, because it's acceptance by a jury of your peers. And so I was accepted in January, and in March they advised me that they have an annual physical show that tours the world, and it starts at the Van Dusen Botanical Gardens in Vancouver in November. They have a physical show there, and then it goes to Colorado, and then it goes to China, and then it goes to 2 other Asia Pacific locations, and then it goes to Europe. So the pieces that are accepted travel for a year to some pretty nice venues around the world and are seen by a lot of people. And there's a big coffee table book that's produced as well. And so I had a piece that I thought would be perfect for it. And so I said, yeah, I'd like to submit this piece. And they said, well, there's the only problem with that is the original has to be less than 3 years old. And I said, well, I don't have anything. And so this was mid-March, and the deadline for submission was May the 5th. And I said, there's no way that I can build something that fast. And so I just put it out of my mind. And a few days later, they contacted me and they said, you know what, because of COVID, you're not the only person that's in this position. We have extended the deadline to May the 25th. Could you produce a piece in time? And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give it a shot. So I'd had this concept in my mind for a long time now. And it's about climate change and habitat loss in the Eastern Canadian Arctic. And up in the area up there, just west of Greenland, there's a big problem with the ice pack melting more and more and more each year. So the polar bear are losing habitat. And also, because the ocean is free and clear of ice, the Atlantic orca that normally hang out at the south end of Greenland are able to head north and west and get into the traditional territory of the narwhal. And the narwhal are a tasty snack for an orca. They have absolutely no protection from orca predation whatsoever. And the orcas are such effective predators.
Pack animals, aren't they? They're crazy. They're so clever.
Yeah, well, they are. They're and so it's all kinds of fun for the orca, and it's not so good for the narwhal, and they have nowhere to escape to. And it's a similar situation for the polar bear, because they're losing their habitat because the ice pack breaks up. And polar bears are a bear, but they are actually considered a marine mammal because they live on the ocean. And so they're having troubles because they end up sometimes getting stranded on ice packs. So I had this vision years ago of a polar bear standing on a relatively small ice pack, looking out at the horizon for the next ice pack that he could swim to, and underneath him is an eroding iceberg. And because the orca can now get to where the narwhal are, heading down one side of the iceberg and sort of curling around it and to the right, he is chasing a much smaller narwhal. The
Oh,
orca is 37 inches long,
yeah.
and the narwhal is about 20. And so there's a very dynamic chase and race around it. And the polar bear is sitting on the top, looking a little bit, well, disconnected from the whole thing, sort of unaware of the drama. So once the original is made, then it goes to the foundry, and they make molds from it. And for every sculpture, you have to create a set of waxes from the molds, and they're not all nice and together like the sculpture was. So what looked like a nice complete orca now looks like this.
Wow.
This hole in the bottom is where the sprues will go for the bronze to get in, and these holes on the side are where his pectoral fins will go, and this hole on the top is where this fin will go, the dorsal fin.
Yeah.
And then I'm working on the tail right now because they're cast in pieces and then welded together.
Right. Yeah. So what's that? Is that a resin or is that a wax?
This is a very hard red wax.
Right.
Let me put this down.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't drop them.
No. So the way the process works, and casting for bronze it's called the lost wax process, and the basic process is about 4,500 years old. So it is an ancient art, and today it's done basically the same way, but with far more modern and efficient technology. So I'll just use this fin because it's simple.
Yeah.
So this now has been taken from the silicone and the fiberglass mold that was taken from the original, right?
Yeah.
And so what you saw, the original was all put together for the photographs, but it all could be disassembled, and each piece was molded. And so they have a mold for this fin, right? So, and a mold for the body, and a mold for this piece, and both fins, and for the polar bear, and for the iceberg, etc. And that alone, that mold costs about $3,500 Canadian to build. So then, now I have, from that mold, they pull, these are just called waxes. So you pull waxes from the mold. So you put the mold together, you pour the wax into it, and it comes out like this, but rougher. You always have to do some finishing work. And so now this is going to be set up with what's called ceramic shell. And so to turn this into bronze, you dip it. They have a big tub that's filled with a ceramic slurry that looks and has the same sort of texture as pancake batter.
Right.
Relatively thick, viscous liquid. And so what they'll do next, and this is done at the foundry, with wax tubes, they will build a circulatory system for each piece, and it will be wax tubes and a wax cup that they will build. And this is designed to create a circulatory system whereby you can pour the bronze in, and the hot air that doesn't get trapped. So there would be like another line coming up from the tip here, just right. So bronze in, air out. And once you've built that, and it sort of looks like one of those Jewish Christmas candles, with lots of things coming up. And then you dip that in this tub of ceramic slurry, and you let it dry. And it's all done in a special hot room and everything. And then you dip it again a day later, and you let it dry. And you repeat that process for about 3 days. And then you dip it. Oh, a deer's walking by my window. Sorry.
Show off.
Yeah. Oh, they're a damn nuisance. And so then you dip it, and while it's still wet, you roll it in a special sand and let it dry. And you do that again, and you eventually build up on every surface about a half an inch of a ceramic shell around it, and around all of the piping to let the bronze and air in and out. And then when that's dry, you let that dry and harden, and then you put it in a kiln, and you fire that ceramic just like a mug, right? So it's exactly the same as you would do a piece of pottery. And in the process, the wax at first pours out, and then it's very, very hot. And then any last little bit of wax is actually vaporized out of there. So now you have this hollow ceramic shell that has that shape in it, right? And while it's still hot from the kiln, which is right next to the forge, where the bronze ingots are being melted, then while it's still hot, you line these things up. They normally bury them in sand for safety, with the cups up, and then they have the crucible of bronze in it, and it is so beautiful. When you pour the bronze, it's almost as runny as water. Like they get it very, very thin, and it's bright orange and gold at the same time. It's an absolutely magical moment. Everybody's wearing aluminized fire gear, and it's noisy as hell and hellishly hot. And
is it like the end scene of Terminator 2,
where it's like
all dark and bright red? And
pretty much. And so then they pour the bronze into this, and then they let it cool, and relatively quickly you can manage it with gloves. And then they take it outside, and with an air hammer, they hammer off all of the now very, very hard ceramic shell, and reveal this now in bronze. And it's all discolored, and there's shrinkage marks, and it's never perfect. And of course, it all has to be welded back together. So then at this point, there's still quite a bit of industrial process. The method they use to weld it together is called TIG welding. TIG stands for tungsten inert gas. And with most stick welding, you have a consumable electrode. With tungsten inert gas, but you get a lot of corrosion with that. So with tungsten inert gas, you have a tungsten electrode that's only about that long, and you sharpen it so that it's very clean. And then it's in a little shroud, and you pump inert gas, which is normally argon. And that's why it's called tungsten inert gas. And what that does is it protects the metal that's being welded from oxygen, so that you don't get oxidation. So then you put the piece together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, and then you've got all of the ugly weld, and that has to be ground and sanded and polished and filed.
Is that what the foundry do, or do you do that?
The foundry does the gross work, and then I go in and
do the sort of final finishing
at the end. And with pieces that are going to go underwater, you know what two dissimilar metals in water will do. It creates a battery and awful corrosion. So it's really critical that for sculptures that go underwater, that the entire piece is chemically the same. So very often the bronze foundry all of the bits that they cut off will just be remelted and used for the next sculpture. But when we're doing one that's going to go underwater, we only use virgin ingots from the same source on the same day. Like they buy all of the ingots that are going to be needed for that. So it's all identical. And then they have molds to actually cast the welding rods, because the welding rod has to be identical to the casting material.
Way.
Otherwise, the welds will be a dissimilar metal, and the ocean will attack them. And at the best of times, we have to have a zinc on the sculptures anyway. We protect them cathodically the same way you protect the boat propeller. But if you don't take that extra step to have your metallurgy perfect, the piece will eat itself to nothing. And this happened with a piece called the Christ of the Abyss in Cozumel, and they didn't take that step, and the piece disintegrated.
Wow.
And actually it snapped off at the ankles in a storm.
Jeez, you'd be devastated, wouldn't you? You've put all that time, effort, and money in.
You sure would. So that's, and at that point, then you sandblast it, and then you put the patina on. And patinas for bronze are not paint; They are other metals that are dissolved in nitric acid.
Yeah.
The green, for instance, is cupric nitrate, which is
Copper.
just copper that's
Yeah.
dissolved. So,
Nice
without
one.
going into ridiculous detail about how you achieve all the colors, it's just different metals dissolved in nitric acid.
I'm getting text messages off my wife. Dinner's ready. I'm like,
Dinner's
5
ready.
more minutes, 5 more minutes.
I'm not afraid of much, but I'm afraid of my wife and yours. So
Brilliant. Well, I can't thank you enough, Simon. Honestly, I've got so much out of just getting to know you over the last couple of months.
no, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Andy, and I am dead serious. If you end up in Nelson and don't come down here, I'll be mad.
Okay, I'll definitely take you up on that offer. I promise.
I won't keep you long, but I will keep you for 30 more seconds.
Go for it.
Our daughter and her family, which includes all of our 4 grandchildren, have lived in Australia for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And they're coming home at the end of October. And because of our quarantining laws, they have to quarantine in our basement suite for 2 weeks when they get home. And then they're staying with us probably for 2 months until they get situated. They're going to move to Victoria,
Right.
but they're going to stay with us for a couple of months. So I would say between October and Christmas, we won't have room. But after that, we will. Because there's 6 of them, right?
Yeah, great stuff, mate. I bet you're looking forward to that then. You won't have seen much of them then if they're living over there, will you?
Yeah, can't wait. We see them every couple of years.
Mm.
And our son and his wife live an hour away. We see them all the time, but they're not having any children. And so all of our grandkids have lived in Australia this whole time. It's been tough.
Right, well, I'll go and get my dinner. You go and crack on with your day, mate. Have a lovely day.
Sounds good, Andy. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, pal. Take it easy. See you later. So that brings to an end episode 20 with my friend Simon Morris. Links to all the things we've discussed are in the podcast notes. My guest on episode 21 is Ranva Jormundsen. She talks about her work for Shearwater, Fourth Element and her love for technical diving. You've been listening to Are You a Scuba Diver? Fancy a Brew with me, Andy the Northern Diver. You can find more scuba related content on my YouTube channel. The link is in the podcast notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review. If there's someone or something you'd like us to discuss, let us know via the Facebook page. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.